What is going on, everybody? Hope you're all having a great Thursday. Hope golf is treating you well. Hope you had a nice night in DFS last night. I came close in the monster, finished fourth, but it was a small monster anyway. Still nice to make a little money on the night. It's been about 5-6 days since I've had at least a profitable night on overall. I've been keep winning on FanDuel and losing on DK, or vice versa. I can't seem to get both of my things together, but hopefully we can improve on that tonight, and hopefully your day slate goes well. Rohde, thanks so much for being with us, man. For those of you guys who don't know out there, this is Rohde51, Jake Rohde. He's been with us on a bunch of different shows. Most of y'all know him by now, but just thought I would drop that in. And we've got an interesting little 5-gamer tonight. I wish we had some of these offenses on the early slate because we've got some teams that I expect to put up some runs. So it should be interesting. We'll have a conversation about how to get a little bit different on these slates, because the smaller slates, you really want to try and focus on that, especially in baseball. You want to let projections help you dictate, but you want them to lean you. You have to get way more off the board on these small slates. There's no reason not to. It's baseball, and on a given day, everybody's is pretty close to equal. If you average it out, the overall, anyway, we just got to find ways to get different. Rohde, how are you doing today? And I know you had a couple of, you were deep in a couple things last night. Talk about that, and then we'll jump into the slate.
Yeah, I had a top 10 finish in the 3K club last night, which is pretty good. That's a 5-digit win. So it's an expensive contest, but getting up there in the top 10 all the time is great. And got a good win on FanDuel, top 20 in the 1650. So yeah, profitable night for me as well. So definitely good to have those nights.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's nice that's one great thing about playing the bigger stuff is, I know, look, obviously you could lose the thing, but like you have a smaller field to compete with. You can be right there, and you got a legitimate shot at winning 100K every time. And you've also got hey, when you don't, winning 10K is pretty good too.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about these games. Start off, we'll go game by game here. Milwaukee and Pittsburgh. I've got, I think Peralta is going to be extremely chalky. It's a good spot in a way. Pittsburgh's lineup doesn't strike out as it's hard to look at overall strikeout numbers. We have to know who's actually going to be in the lineup, because they, like with Polanco, who's back, who strikes out a ton, but he also has a little bit of pop. I like Peralta. I'm debating whether or not I'm going to I don't think I'm going to be locking him in. He's really chalky. I'm not going to be playing any of the Chad Kuhl. How about you in this spot? Where do you stand on Peralta, and then any interest in Kuhl at all for you?
Yeah, Peralta's coming in as a top 2 guy for me. He's really high owned, over 50% most likely. Yeah, I'll probably get some of them, but I like a couple other guys we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So, yeah, I might be able to get off them with a couple other cheaper guys.
Yeah, and I also think there's a little bit of weather concern here, just that we'll keep an eye on, and on our live show that me and Cheats will do later. I'll mention that where we stand with that. What about the Milwaukee stack? Are we going back to it? They've been pretty good.
Yeah, they've been pretty good. They're the top stack of the night. Most likely I'll get to them in at least one of my builds. They're projecting really well right now. So
you have them as the top stack right now?
Yeah, they're coming out as the top stack right now.
Yeah, from a point per dollar basis, that certainly makes some sense on DK, especially, right? Like you've got
DK.
Yeah, you've got Rowdy Tellez at 2.6 is a great value play. He's probably one of the better values on the slate. Even Abizail Garcia, who I don't know if he'll get as much ownership. Now, it doesn't have a ton of power, but it's a smaller slate. We don't need to look for the ultimate ceilings. You've got the cheap Narvaez. I like Colton Wong and Adames. And then you could always mix in Lorenzo Cain for cheap. So I certainly get it from a point per dollar standpoint that they're really good. What I would say is try to throw, if you're going to make let's say you're making 4 or 5 stacks and you're making 20 lineups overall of Milwaukee, I would just encourage people to play like Jackie Bradley to get off the board, because otherwise it's going to be hard to get off the board. Now, you don't have to worry quite as much in the highest buy-in stuff, but even tonight you might a little bit, because it's just such a condensed slate. All right.
Yeah, I like that. Yep. No, you're good. I like that. Cain or Bradley are coming in lower owned. Even Garcia is only coming in right now 10%. He might be the guy I look to too as well, and he's cheap too. So
yep, I have Tellez and Garcia. I think I totally agree. I do want to mention just real quickly on the Pittsburgh side that because the bats are so cheap, and I like Peralta a ton, obviously not in the same lineup as Peralta, although on 5-game slates I've definitely done it before. Ben Gamel and Gregory Polanco both have enough upside to where I could take a shot on either of those guys for super cheap if you want to go there, or even Nagowski. But I don't think I'm going to end up being, it's not something I want to focus on, but they're just, they're 2,500 and 2,200. And that would be the only, you know, they actually profile for me as the best upside hitters on the whole team. And they're two of the cheapest guys on the slate. So just mentioning it because it's a giant slate. So I might end up with a tiny bit of one or two of those guys, but I don't think I want to attack Peralta in general, obviously. All right, so we've got this matchup again. Two good pitchers, Erod and Ryu. Great hitting weather in Boston. It's got also some weather concerns as well, but you've got an extreme hitters umpire. In general, I'm much less likely to try and pick on Ryu. Well, first of all, I don't think in this matchup I'm going to play these pitchers. I do think that I am considering a tiny bit of Ryu. He's more of a longer shot play for me, but like if you want to get a little bit different, he's a really, really good real life pitcher, and he's had a few struggles at weird times lately, and then he's been dominant at other times. It's obviously not an ideal matchup for him or anybody else, but I do think Ryu is on my board, so I thought I'd mention him. Not a priority, but a guy who I'm looking at as a potential for a larger field GPP. And then I like the stacks. I just don't feel quite as high on especially the Boston side of it as I would normally, because I have enough respect for Ryu. While I love Rodriguez and I think that he's got good stuff, that getting pulled in the last game in the first inning kind of sucked for us. Some of us played him, and you know he was struggling in the second inning, and then just he came out. It happens a lot with him. They said illness, whatever. I don't know what's happening these days with all that stuff, but I definitely have Toronto as a higher priority. They profile pretty well against Rodriguez, so they're expensive to get to, and they should have ownership, but Toronto is the side I would side with over Boston in this matchup. How about you?
Yeah, I actually probably have to differ a little bit on that. I'd probably say the Boston side a little bit more, but it's real close, I think. It's pretty, I think just the Boston side a little bit more because Toronto bats are expensive. So I think the Boston kind of grades out a little bit better by the data, but it's pretty close. And I might not see myself on this game a lot at all. I mean, we're going to talk about a couple other games that I really like and a little bit cheaper guys too. So, but yeah, I mean, you can get some guys real low owned out of here. I wouldn't play the chalkier guys, but there's some guys that like JD Martinez, Kiki on the Boston side that are going to grade out a little bit cheaper. And then for Toronto side, we're going to have like Vlad. I think he's expensive on DK, so he's going to be a lot lower owned. And Semien at second base too. So a couple lower owned guys there for you.
Yeah, I like the Vlad Martinez idea. If we can find the way to get them in, I mentioned, you know, we'll find some cheap spots on these guys. I also like Kirk as a hitter for Toronto. I'm with you on JD. He's my favorite play. If I had to use one guy on Boston, it's always going to be JD against the lefty. It's pretty much going to be JD.
He projects well.
Yeah. Yep. But I, you know, Kirk is a little bit of a better hitter than McGuire and Adams. So if he's in there, again, I would like that. Vlad, obviously 6,500. Yeah. Semien. These guys are expensive enough to where it could keep their ownership low. And that's kind of interesting. Also, wait to see how it breaks out. Maybe we don't. Biggio may not be in there. Espanol may get in there as well, who's also really cheap. Not an ideal thing, but for a 5-man stack, I don't mind if you want to go there. But they really did price these guys up, and you know, unless we get some sort of different lineup, which is very possible on a Thursday, it's going to be hard to get Toronto cheap. And like you said, Boston's a little bit cheaper. If Verdugo's in the lineup, he would be my favorite. He actually, I know this year he hasn't been good lefty-lefty. Historically, he's been awesome lefty-lefty. I mean, I'm a Dodger guy, so I know his whole minor league history, his major league history, and was a teammate with Ryu for my Dodgers for a while. So Renfroe would be my number 2 guy, and then Verdugo would be right after that. So Verdugo, Renfroe, Martinez would be my 3 favorite Boston guys. Vlad, Teoscar, then Springer would be my favorite guys from the side, the Blue Jays side of it. But we got to find a way to get them in because they're real expensive. All right, let's talk about Baltimore.
Like it.
Go ahead. Yeah, Baltimore, Detroit.
No, Baltimore, Detroit.
All right. So Casey Mize, they are not letting pitch more than, they said it was going to be 4 innings, then it turned into 4 2/3 last time, which they almost let him go there. And it's not a pitch count thing, as you can see. It's an inning, it's a straight innings limit that they put on him when the season was sort of over for them. He's a young stud. I'm still curious about it. I mean, every time he's projected, and I know, like, I looked at the bat, for example. He's been in all these games. He's been projected to throw in the 80s. He's been cruising along in these games. This is not like he's getting pulled for struggling. I mean, he had given up 1 hit to Texas. He was cruising 54 pitches, and they took him out. They did let him throw 79 the last time, which gives you a little bit of hope. If I knew Casey Mize was going to be good to go, I would be all over Casey Mize today in this matchup. I just feel so nervous because there's no reason for them to put him in any dangerous situation whatsoever. He's still on my list because it's a small slate. I think people are actually going to play him a little bit. Actually, you know what? I don't think people are going to play him a little bit because I think people are now caught on to being how weird the situation is. He does have a 4.5K prop at 6,900. I don't know where I stand with this one. Do you have any more clarity or any other thoughts on that?
On the data wise, he grades out number 4 here for me, but I might have to play him. He is coming at low own, and this is a good way to get different. I think you can play him if you want to risk it on a 5-game slate. Sorry, but he comes out as number 4th pitcher for me, so I don't mind the play.
Yeah, the only problem I have, like I said, is that, I mean, look at this game log right here. Like, this is not a coincidence. They announced that they were going to have him on an innings limit, and then he throws 56, 50, and 54, and then 79. 79 is the one that gets me optimistic, and we should be playing. If you tell me Casey Mize is throwing 80 pitches tonight, I'm all into it. I'm totally in. If you tell me that he's going to be cut off after 4 innings, no matter what, I'm not going to be in, because I also think if we can get some more clarity, and I'll try to by live, Casey Mize would be a very good bet against him to get the 4.5 Ks if he's only going to have a 4-inning limit. Just throwing that out there, because I think, the other weird thing is that this Wells guy, look, he pitched 5 2/3 the last time he was out. It is Detroit. He's got a 4.5 K prop also. He's 5,200. You want to talk about getting really different. Now, I like Detroit bats, so don't get me wrong, but I think there's some merit here to maybe giving Wells a shot. It's obviously a Detroit lineup that we've seen go boom bust. Like I said, in the last time out against a tough Tampa Bay team, threw 93 pitches, had 7 Ks, put up 16 fantasy points, which I would be happy with tonight at 5,200. I also think he has some win equity in this game, which he didn't as much in the Tampa Bay game, so you can maybe get to 20. I have Wells on my list, and I don't see anyone else playing him, so I'm just trying to get different. He's one of the ways I'm thinking about it. Have you thought about him at all, or is this making sense to you at all, or is it too off?
It makes a lot of sense. I haven't thought about him yet. He does grade out not very good because of the Tigers as the number 1 stack, kind of, or at the top behind the Brewers. So the bats are going to be chalky for Detroit. So if you really want to get different, playing that Wells play is probably going to vault you to the top if Detroit does do a bust situation.
Yep. Well, let's talk about the Detroit bats, because, as you mentioned, they're going to be extremely popular. And it's a team that, in general, when they go over the board popular, I try to get a little bit off of them. Look, if you were going to say who's the best play here, I think Scope and Haas stand out crazy, but they're the expensive ones. Then you've got the cheap guys you can mix in. The one who I probably like the most is going to be Robbie Grossman. Always been better against lefties than righties. Get him at the top of the lineup, or where's he at right now? But they have him at 6th. I actually thought he was going to go back to 2nd, but we'll see how that lineup shakes out. But I do like Grossman a ton. Cheap. And then you've got Zach Short at shortstop. You could even use Castro. Cabrera is really cheap at first, obviously. So there's ways to get cheap with the stack. It's just, and then Candelario obviously is another solid play at 3rd. Just hard to know. It's hard when they're going to be chalky, because individually, outside of Scope and Haas, there's really not a whole lot of power here. But they somehow seem to keep continuing to do it. And then you've got Badu, who I like, but it's a lefty for him. I still think he gets owned. But I like the idea initially of Badu, thinking he'd be lower owned. But yeah, Detroit I have as one of the better stacks. I feel like when they rate like this, I'm going to have to personally get a little bit off of them.
Yeah, Zach Short would probably be the lowest owned guy, one of the lower owned guys. Shortstop's a deep position. Now you got Tatis, you got Bogarts. So there's going to be some ownership there at shortstop. So if you do want to get different, Zach Short probably be your guy if you want to play like a one-off or a mini 3-man stack to go with your 5-man or however you do it, 3-3-2 or something like that.
I love that. I think that's a really good call. And what I've been doing with Detroit when they've been popular, and I've been playing this, I've been using them as secondary stacks. I've been including Zach Short into those because he's always the lowest owned. And look, these are not glowing numbers. First of all, he doesn't play every day, obviously, not even close. But he does have just enough pop to get there, and he bats it high enough in the order, usually 6th or 7th, to where I'm willing to take that shot on him. I think tonight he'd probably end up 7th against. We'll see. It could end up, depends on what they do with Badu. With him, they platoon him when he's, but he's just been too hot. Probably it won't do that. So I'm gonna guess he's gonna be 6th or 7th. All right, let's talk about Oakland and LA. A little warmer here in LA than usual this time of year. I really like. So this is really weird to see Dylan Bundy. I mean, what has happened? You know, they moved him to the bullpen because he was struggling. He's always been all over the map, but he sort of felt like he had turned the corner last year. And we were seeing him put up 30s like all the time. I've made so much money with Dylan Bundy. He actually was on a lineup, one of my big mistake lineups. I won 100K and I won the seat the same night, and he was in both of them. But I had done it was one of the rare nights I did a build. I did a script thing, and somehow I didn't have it checked off where you couldn't have hitters against your own pitcher. So I ended up with him, and the only run they scored was a home run, and my guy had 2 stolen bases in the game also. So I won the tournament with him against my own guy on a full slate. But I don't know. I need to get an exact pitch count. I'm gonna probably take a look at to be completely honest, at the bat and some other projections on what his pitches will be tonight, because he hasn't been starting, obviously. I'm guessing he's not going to go particularly deep, but at 6,200 against an Oakland team that has strikeouts in the lineup, he sort of fits into the same category as MIZE for me. But if they really let him go, he's got a ton of upside here. At the same time, he's been getting crushed, so I understand taking the Oakland side of it. I don't think it's even confirmed for sure. It looks like he's going to be the starter, but we don't have a total on this game, and that's partially because of I'm guessing because we don't know for sure who the starters are going to be. But I think Montas is an awesome play as well. Montas is the main one here. I actually think I prefer Montas off the other chalkier pitcher. Well, he'll be chalky too, but I do like Montas quite a bit. I think he's really good. I think he's underrated. He always ends up being lower owned than everybody projects him to be, and you can see not only good but fairly consistent. I mean, look, these guys in the AL, when you look at their bad games that take things down, Boston, obviously forgivable. They're going to work counts. They're going to be deep in counts. I can't explain the bad game against Texas, but it happens. But against these Angels, you see last time out against this team, he put up 28 fantasy points. I could see something like that happening again. And I like Montas's stuff a lot. So I have Montas towards the top of my list today. How about you with these pitchers? And then we'll get into the hitting.
Yeah, Montas might be one of my favorite ones. I really like him. Do you think the Bundy's going to pitch for them, or you think I got Alex Cobb's right now, but I haven't done a refresh in a while?
Well, you know, we have news as of this morning that Joe Madden said that Bundy would be starting earlier in the day. I think Cobb was projected.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I haven't got to update then. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That was early this morning that happened. So don't.
Gotcha.
Actually, you know what? That was 30 minutes ago. So.
30 minutes ago. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So
I've had this loaded up here for a bit, so I can't really refresh it. So.
Right. I would have interest in Cobb if he was pitching too. Oakland's a team I like to play, and it's a team I like to pitch against. I like both. I always end up going that route with them because they strike out, but they have tons of power, and they have some stolen base upside when you include guys like Laureano. And then if Chapman ever gets back to being himself. All right, for hitters in this game, look, if you're not playing Montas, I don't think I need to tell anybody that Shohei Ohtani is kind of ridiculous, right? Is this guy a video game or something? It's pretty nuts at this point. I mean, I always talk about the best. He's the best player in baseball because you can't argue with a guy who's pitching also and then doing what he's doing offensively. But he's got to be getting into the top 10 of hitters in baseball. I know that for average and all that, there's a bunch of guys who are hitting 300 with a bunch of home runs, but he's hitting 280 and he's got 37 home runs. It's just wild to me how good he's been. Looks like we have Marte after that trade already available. And assuming that he's in the lineup, it makes that Oakland lineup that much more formidable. That outfield of Canna, Laureano, and Marte is pretty solid. What are you doing with the bats in this game?
I'm actually looking at Oakland to be a decent stack tonight. I really like them as bats. They're coming in right now as very low ownership, like extremely low ownership. I don't know why. Maybe it's not understood yet who is pitching for the other team, but
Yeah,
I really like them. I think they're like you said, they either smacking the ball out of the park or striking out. So if they're low owned, grab that power bats, throw them in your lineup. Hope they hit 4 or 5 homers for the team. You got a good stack. I really like it.
I think that's an interesting way to go. And then I think, for the Angels, I'm just going to point out that this ridiculous pricing on Justin Upton, I don't understand it. I don't need to understand it. Let's play Justin Upton. Hit another home run last night. I needed a double with a runner on, and I win the monster last night. But no big deal. At least it wasn't for 100K, so it's not like it's going to kill me or anything. But I really do like. I'm just going to keep loading up on Upton at this price. There's just too much power upside, even against Montas, who I like quite a bit. And obviously Shohei, if you use Ohtani, I would suggest using him at first because you can get your value in the outfield, and there's also some big top spends in the outfield, and there's less first baseman. But and then the Oakland side of it, certainly if it's going to be a bullpen game, I like it less. But if Bundy's going to go, I mean, this guy has given up tons of power, tons of hard contact this year. I know I mentioned I spoke on his behalf, but I mean, Olsen would be the number one play. Obviously, that'd make it hard. Maybe you could play an Olsen and Ohtani. In that case, you'd have to use Ohtani in the outfield. But one thing that's interesting is the Mitch Moreland thing. So I don't want to go crazy with Mitch Moreland. He's literally a platoon player at this point, still has power. The problem with Moreland is they tend to bat him 5th or so and Olsen 3rd. So what happens is later in the game, when they do make the pitching change, they usually bring in a lefty for that inning to face Olsen, which also means that Moreland comes out of the game, right? So that's the thing. If let's say Olsen's batting 3rd, or for some reason they moved him to 2nd, he's probably going to bat 3rd, Olsen, and Moreland's batting 6th. That actually gives a little bit better of a reason to play Moreland, because you have that lefty to come in to face Olsen. Maybe the lefty gets out of that inning, and then you start the next inning with the righty, because the rest of the Oakland lineup is right-handed. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
It just in terms of risk, I think it matters more on these kind of slates. So I would say, if you're going to play an Oakland stack, maybe you do want to include Moreland. Obviously, on FanDuel, you can play both Moreland and Olsen together. I'm not saying it's optimal, but I like the idea of Moreland's a guy you can get at 0% ownership on these slates every time, and I'm always a fan of that. So both of these hitting sides, I'm not showing. I mean, they're not going to project like anything early in the day. Later in the day, I think you'll see a little more ownership on them, but for the most part, people want to play Detroit. They want to play Boston. They want to play Toronto. They want to play Milwaukee. I think these teams get overlooked. And in addition to having interest in the pitching, I do think they make sense stack-wise as well.
Yep.
I'll let you start it off with Colorado, San Diego. Musgrove is going to be the massive chalk on this slate for good reason against Colorado. He hasn't been good, to be honest. He had this same matchup against Colorado at home last time, didn't even go 5 innings. He gets himself into pitch count trouble. I'm going to take a look for him. I honestly believe that the pitcher's umpire doesn't always matter. But for him, getting a non-extreme hitter's umpire is very important, because he can get so deep in those counts and just takes away his ceiling. And if you look at, just looking at the game log alone, you look at Montas versus Musgrove, and Musgrove being much more popular. When is the last time we've seen Musgrove put out a real outing? He hasn't put up 20 fantasy points in months. Colorado's the worst team against right-handed pitching on the road in baseball. So I get it. I'm going to have Musgrove, but I'm going to try to find ways to get a little bit different if I can. I still may end up with him in my main lineup on DraftKings, but as of right now, the name of the game is try to get a little bit different.
Yeah, if he's going to be that high owned, I might think about getting off him too. He is pretty cheap. Colorado's been smacking it up here and there too. So maybe they're coming in at low ownership. So maybe grabbing a 3-man stack of them with some of their Story, a couple of their power bats there, and maybe hit Story hit a homer off him, and he does play a shorter game and doesn't get over 20 points like you're saying. So I do like that. So that's a good idea, I think.
I like the Story call. I really like Ryan McMahon against him if you're not going to play him. McMahon's getting too cheap. I know he's struggled later in the season. I'll just tell you, this kid's legit. He can really play. He can hit the ball. He doesn't need to be playing in Colorado to hit the ball. He's actually sort of bounced back recently, and he hasn't been hitting home runs lately, but he's been I mean, at 5,500, like he was earlier in the season on the road, you couldn't really play him. At 3,500, this guy, he's putting up 7, 13, 10, 5, and he's seeing the ball pretty well. His strikeouts aren't out of control. So he would be the guy I have the most interest in, along with Trevor Story, who's actually probably as cheap as we ever see Trevor Story, right? I mean, he never breaks the 5K barrier, and he's usually closer to 6K. So I can get behind some Story if you're not playing Musgrove, and I think it's a great way to leverage against the field.
Yeah, for a small game slate, this is definitely good.
Yeah. So what I have for San Diego, who I think is probably the top team to play, I almost want to mini stack them just because of how popular they're going to be. I mean, everybody is probably going to be in double digits pretty much, even the bottom of the order, with the exception of maybe, because of the number of outfielders you can have, maybe Will Myers and Cronenworth in the lefty-lefty don't get as high owned. So maybe you can play those guys. But I have everybody in here as pretty popular against Freeland, who sucks. Freeland is legit one of the worst starters in baseball. The only thing with him is he's able to keep. I mean, this is after he just dominated my Dodgers, of course, for like this always happens. These junk throwing lefties who can't get anybody out. Their only good starts end up being against the Dodgers. That, and he had the one against Pittsburgh. He's actually been much better than he was early in the season. Oddly enough, he's actually pitched just about as well at home. I think better at home than he has on the road, which is really, really weird. But I think against this San Diego team, man, it just lines up looking like San Diego's going to get all over him, doesn't it?
Yeah, they're really chalky though. So if you want to make a pivot, maybe fade this game, or or mini stack it, don't 5-man stack it, or just play a couple one-offs, maybe to Tatis or Machado one-offs. Maybe hope they hit a homer or two, but yeah, they're not even grading out that way as a stack, maybe because a couple of the guys are more expensive. But yeah, it's going to be chalky.
Well, I can tell you this right now. If I do play them, I'm going to try to include Will Myers and Cronenworth, because that's the way.
Yeah, those two are coming in lower.
Yeah. That's I think your best answer. I think even Tommy Pham, because of the number of outfielders on the slate, might end up even being a little bit lower than usual. So Pham, Myers, Myers and Cronenworth, though, especially, those are probably the only single-digit ownership guys you're going to see on this game. Really like Austin Nola at 3,200. I actually think that, there's other catching options, so maybe he doesn't get as much ownership because you've got, you pay 500 more for Narvaez, who's a better hitter. But just in terms of if you're going to make the 5-man stack, I just think you want to try to include these guys. Or your 3-man stack better be something like Oakland or the Angels that are way off the board, because it's going to be really hard to get different.
Yeah.
5-game slate. So just to sort of I guess recap sort of what I like here. I've got my main pitcher as Montas and Musgrove as of right now, but I am more than willing, because of ownership, to jump over to, Peralta's going to be high owned as well, but I want to look deeper into Bundy, which I'll talk about before live. I want to look deeper into MIZE to see if they're going to let him go. I want to take a couple shots on Ryu in large field, even if that just means a couple of the $18 or whatever that is, just to try and hit a home run with Ryu. And I won't be touching Eduardo Rodriguez. It's too tough of a matchup for him, and the Toronto just doesn't strike out enough. And then this Wells kid, that might be what I end up coming back to. This Wells kid for Baltimore, like, as much as we talk about Detroit being, great for this and that, this is not a lineup that on paper stands out as being able to crush everybody. And if they haven't seen this guy before, he just pitched well against Tampa Bay, threw 93 pitches his last outing. That's good enough for me to take a shot on a 5,200 guy that allows me to get in the bats I want and get way off the board. So I might consider going, even in my main lineup, doing something weird like playing Wells. How about you for pitching? What are your main pitchers?
Yeah, I really like Montas. I'm definitely going to be interested in the Casey Mize. He's cheaper, and I like the upside he brings. Musgrove. Colorado's been a little bit hot. Story's been hitting a lot of home runs. Musgrove hasn't hit over 20. Just be cautious. He's high owned. He has a bad game. You can get way ahead of the field by playing off him. Peralta, good play. He's a little more expensive. He's going against Pitt, which, does get some strikeouts. He can get a decent score. So those are kind of my pitching options. I really like stacking Oakland bats still. Brewers are coming in pretty good. Probably get to some of them. I mean, Detroit's obviously a big stack, but they're going to be chalky, and a little bit of Padres sprinkled in there too. So
that all makes sense to me. Yeah, I've got San Diego, Toronto as my two favorites. Obviously, you're gonna have some ownership there, but oddly enough, because Toronto is so expensive, maybe you can play these two stacks at get a little lower ownership. I mean, I've got currently projected, and it never ends up this way with him. But I mean, I know it's like Vlad against the lefty. He's 6,500, and it's just maybe people don't want to quite spend that for him. So I can definitely get on board with this, and I don't think people are going to play Grichuk, Teoscar, and Simeon that much. So I actually think Toronto might end up being my main stack, because I think you're going to get lower ownership. I will be sprinkling in Detroit and Milwaukee, but I like what you said about the Oakland and the Angels. I think that's a really good way to get different. Of course, we need confirmation on both starting pitchers before we do anything, but it's the only game without a total, which is partly why no one's showing up ownership wise, but you might actually be able to get low ownership on guys like Ohtani tonight as well. And if you're going to use the cheapos that I'm talking about, MIZE and Wells and all those guys, that might be an interesting way to go on this slate. And hopefully you get your 30 points out of pitching, and you get like 180 out of your hitters, because it's going to be a monster hitting slate, in my opinion, even though it's only a 5-gamer.
Right on.
All right, guys. Sounds good. Hey, thanks so much, Rohde, as always. We really appreciate it. Guys, let's crush it tonight. Let us know how you're doing for the day slate, for the night slate, for everything. And let's make some money. Good luck, everybody.
Good luck.